Jamaican Folklore Series. Episode 3, River Mumma's Promise. Inspired by the legend of River Mumma. Chapter 1. The girl who heard the river sing. There are rivers that carry water. There are rivers that carry memories. And then, there are rivers that carry promises. Not far from Harmony Gap, hidden beneath towering bamboo and limestone cliffs, flowed the Martha Bray's forgotten sister, a narrow river the old people simply called Mother's Water. Maps gave it another name. The villagers never used it, because names written on paper belonged to strangers. The river belonged to Jamaica. Every child in Harmony Gap grew up hearing the same warning. Swim if you must. Fish if you must. But never answer when the river calls your name. Most laughed. Children always do. Until the summer 18-year-old Alana Grant heard it for herself. She had returned from Kingston after finishing her first year at university. The city had been loud, fast, always asking her to become someone new. Harmony Gap asked nothing of her. It simply welcomed her home. Each morning, she walked to the river carrying her grandfather's old camera. She wanted to photograph the Jamaica tourists rarely saw. Mist rising through bamboo. Blue morpho butterflies dancing over the water. The patient fisherman who still greeted the sunrise before casting a single line. Her grandfather had taught her one rule. The river gives beautiful pictures, but never take more than the river offers. She smiled every time she remembered him saying it. On the third morning, the river was unusually still. Not a ripple disturbed its glassy surface. Even the kingfishers remained silent. Alana lifted her camera. The viewfinder framed the water perfectly. She pressed the shutter. Click. The screen on the back of the camera lit up. She frowned. The photograph showed someone standing in the middle of the river. A woman. Long black hair flowing to her waist. A white dress drifting across the water as though touched by a wind Alana couldn't feel. She lowered the camera. The river was empty. She looked again at the photograph. The woman remained. Perfectly clear. Perfectly still. A chill ran across her shoulders despite the warm morning sun. She checked the image twice. 3 times. The mysterious woman had not disappeared. Then, from somewhere across the quiet water, a voice floated gently through the mist. Soft. Almost musical. Not frightening. Not demanding. Simply calling. Alana. She spun around. No one stood behind her. Again. The voice drifted over the river. Alana. This time, it sounded as though the river itself had spoken. Far above, a single white heron took flight. Its wings beat slowly against the morning sky. And beneath the crystal surface, something shimmered. Not like a fish. Not like sunlight. Like a pair of eyes. Opening beneath the water. The photograph that shouldn't exist. Alana stood perfectly still. The camera felt heavier in her hands than it had only moments before. She looked at the river. Nothing. Only morning mist drifting lazily above the surface. She looked back at the photograph. The woman remained. Standing waist-deep in the water. Long black hair falling almost to her knees. A white dress moving gently, though the river itself had become as smooth as polished glass. Alana enlarged the image. The woman's face should have become blurred. Instead, it grew clearer. Beautiful. Ageless. Her skin shimmered like sunlight dancing beneath shallow water. Her eyes were unlike any Alana had ever seen. Not blue. not green. They held the color of the river itself after rain. Deep. Ancient. Endless. Alana's pulse quickened. This has to be a reflection. She lowered the camera again. The river was empty. No woman. No footprints. No ripples. She slowly raised the camera once more. There she was. Exactly where she had been before. Waiting. A cool breeze swept through the bamboo. Thousands of leaves whispered together. Then, the voice returned. Gentle. Almost impossible to hear. Alana. This time it came from everywhere at once. From the flowing water. From the trees. From the mist itself. She turned in a slow circle. The riverbank was deserted. Only a white heron stood farther downstream, watching her with unusual stillness. It spread its wings. Not frightened. Almost inviting. Then it glided silently into the morning sky. Alana looked back at the camera. The mysterious woman had changed. She was no longer standing still. One arm had lifted. Slowly. Gracefully. She pointed toward the deepest bend in the river. Alana frowned. I didn't take another picture. Her thumb searched through the images. There had only been one photograph. Yet somehow, the figure inside it had moved. A knot tightened in her stomach. Her grandfather's words drifted back to her. The river gives beautiful pictures, but never ask it for another one. At the time, she had laughed. Now, she wasn't laughing. She slung the camera over her shoulder and began walking toward the place the woman had indicated. The bamboo grew thicker. The air cooler. Every step muffled by damp leaves. Soon she reached a quiet pool where the current slowed almost to nothing. The villagers called it Mirror Bend. Children were forbidden to swim there. Fishermen never cast their nets there. And no one could remember why. The surface reflected the sky so perfectly that it seemed less like water, and more like another world waiting beneath it. Alana knelt carefully beside the bank. For a long moment, she saw only her own reflection. Then another face appeared beside hers. Not in the water behind her. Beneath it. Watching. The same woman from the photograph. Smiling. Not with menace. With recognition. Before Alana could move, a single clear note drifted up from beneath the river. It sounded like someone gently blowing into a carved wooden whistle. The water rippled once. Only once. And the reflection vanished. Alana remained frozen at the river's edge. Because for the first time in her life, she no longer believed she had discovered a legend. She believed the legend had discovered her. Miss Ivy's warning. Alana did not tell anyone about the photograph. Not at first. She walked back through Harmony Gap with her camera hanging silently against her side. The morning had become busy. Children in neat uniforms hurried toward school. A bread truck rattled along the narrow road. Someone called out good morning from a veranda. Everything looked ordinary. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every puddle she passed caught her attention. Every stream. Every rain barrel. Every reflection. She found herself looking twice, almost expecting the woman to be standing there again. By afternoon, she could no longer keep the secret. If anyone knew the old stories, it would be Miss Ivy. Unlike Papa Elias, who told stories to keep memories alive, Miss Ivy was the village's healer. People came to her with fever, with heartbreak, with questions they were too afraid to ask anyone else. Her little board house sat beneath an enormous breadfruit tree at the edge of Harmony Gap. Bundles of drying herbs hung beneath the veranda roof. The scent of peppermint, cerasee, and guinea hen weed drifted gently through the air. Miss Ivy looked up before Alana reached the steps. "You've been to the river." It wasn't a question. Alana stopped walking. "How did you know?" The old woman smiled faintly. "The river always leaves a little of itself behind." She pointed toward Alana's shoes. A thin layer of pale silver sand clung to the soles. Sand unlike any found elsewhere in the parish. Miss Ivy's smile disappeared. "Come inside." The tiny house was cool despite the afternoon heat. Glass bottles filled with herbs lined wooden shelves. An old Bible rested beside a worn enamel lamp. Above the doorway hung a small woven cross made from dried palm leaves. Miss Ivy poured 2 cups of warm bush tea. Only after Alana had taken the first sip did she speak again. "What did you see?" Alana hesitated. Then she placed the camera on the table. Without saying a word, she opened the photograph. Miss Ivy stared. Longer than Alana expected. She did not gasp. She did not seem surprised. Instead, she quietly closed the camera. "You heard her too." Alana felt the room grow colder. "You know who she is?" Miss Ivy nodded slowly. "My grandmother called her River Mumma. The guardian. The keeper. The one who remembers every promise ever spoken beside flowing water." Alana swallowed. "I thought River Mumma was supposed to be a story." Miss Ivy looked toward the open window where the distant river shimmered between the trees. "Most stories begin because someone mistakes the truth for imagination." The old woman reached into a cedar chest. Carefully, she removed a faded photograph. It had been taken decades earlier. Its corners were cracked. Its colors almost gone. She handed it to Alana. A young woman stood smiling beside the very same river. Beautiful. Confident. Holding a fishing basket. Alana frowned. "Who's she?" "My sister." Silence settled over the room. "She disappeared 43 years ago." Alana looked up. "No one ever found her. The river kept her?" Miss Ivy shook her head. "No. The river returned her." Alana blinked. "I don't understand." "You will." The old woman's voice had become almost a whisper. "But first." She pointed toward the camera. "Tell me. When you took that photograph, did River Mumma smile?" Alana's heart skipped. She had told no one that detail. No one. Slowly. She nodded. Miss Ivy closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was both sorrow and hope in her face. "Then she isn't calling you to die." A long pause followed. "She's calling you to remember." Outside, the wind stirred the bamboo. Far away, from somewhere beyond Mirror Bend, a single note rose from the river once more. Soft. Clear. Like a carved wooden whistle echoing across the water. This time, Miss Ivy heard it too. The promise beneath Mirror Bend. Neither woman spoke. The whistle drifted across the valley once more. Soft. Melancholy. Beautiful. It carried no fear. Only longing. Miss Ivy slowly stood. Her knees creaked with age, but her movements were steady. She reached for an old walking stick carved from lignum vitae. "We're going." Alana blinked. To the river? Miss Ivy nodded. If she's calling during daylight, she has waited long enough. The two women followed the narrow footpath that wound through bamboo and wild ginger. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees in ribbons of gold. Hummingbirds darted among clusters of red hibiscus. For anyone passing by, it looked like an ordinary Jamaican afternoon. Only the river knew otherwise. When they reached Mirror Bend, the air changed. The breeze disappeared. The birds fell silent. Even the insects seemed to pause. The river became perfectly still. Not a single ripple disturbed its surface. Miss Ivy removed her shoes before stepping onto the smooth stones at the water's edge. She bowed her head. Not in worship. In respect. Alana quietly followed. For several long moments. Then, the water began to glow. Not brightly. Gently. As though sunlight had risen from beneath the river instead of above it. Tiny golden lights drifted upward through the clear water. Like fireflies swimming instead of flying. The glow spread slowly across the surface until the entire pool shimmered like polished glass. Then, she appeared. Not by rising from the depths. Not by stepping from the mist. She simply was there. Standing waist-deep in the water exactly as she had in the photograph. Her long dark hair floated around her without drifting. Her white dress shimmered like woven moonlight. Her eyes held the quiet strength of someone who had watched centuries pass. Alana expected fear. Instead, she felt peace. River Mumma smiled. It was not the smile of a stranger. It was the smile of someone recognizing a face they had been waiting to see. Miss Ivy lowered her head. Guardian. The spirit inclined hers in return. No words passed between them. None were needed. Then River Mumma looked directly at Alana. Slowly. She lifted one hand. The river beneath her fingertips rippled outward in perfect circles. Within those circles, images began to appear. Not reflections. Memories. Children laughing as they filled buckets from the river generations ago. Women washing clothes while singing old work songs. Fishermen thanking the water before casting their nets. Families planting trees along the riverbank after every rainy season. Each image faded gently into the next. The river was not merely showing history. It was showing a covenant. A promise between the people and the water that sustained them. Then the images changed. The water darkened. Plastic bottles drifted through the current. Oil shimmered across the surface. Trees disappeared from the banks. The river narrowed. Fish floated lifelessly near the reeds. Alana felt tears sting her eyes. River Mumma had not called her to uncover an old secret. She had called her to protect something still alive. The spirit finally spoke. Her voice was no louder than flowing water over smooth stones. Every generation inherits a promise. For some, it is gold. For others, it is land. She looked into Alana's eyes. But for yours, it is the river. The glow around Mirror Bend slowly faded. The memories disappeared. Only the gentle current remained. River Mumma's form became transparent, blending once more with the water. Just before she vanished completely, she whispered one final sentence. Tell them. Before they forget how to listen. The river returned to its ordinary rhythm. Birdsong filled the valley once again. A kingfisher flashed across the water. Miss Ivy looked at Alana with quiet certainty. You weren't chosen because you're the bravest. She smiled softly. You were chosen because you still stopped long enough to hear the river sing. Alana looked down at the camera hanging from her shoulder. For the first time, she understood. She hadn't come home to take beautiful photographs. She had come home to become a keeper of the promise. The village that had forgotten. The next morning, Harmony Gap woke to the familiar sounds of island life. Roosters crowed before sunrise. A radio somewhere played old reggae through a crackling speaker. The scent of frying dumplings drifted from open kitchens. On the surface, everything was exactly as it had always been. Yet Alana saw the village differently now. She noticed things she had overlooked before. A discarded plastic bottle resting beneath a bamboo thicket. An old shopping bag caught in the roots of a guango tree. Rainwater carrying litter toward the river after the previous night's shower. They were small things. Easy things to ignore. Until they gathered. She walked to Mirror Bend just after dawn. The river flowed gently, reflecting the first light of morning. There was no sign of River Mumma. No glowing water. No whisper. Only the steady current. Alana smiled. She understood. The river did not need to perform miracles every day. Sometimes, its greatest miracle was simply continuing to flow. She lifted her camera. Instead of searching for spirits, she photographed the river itself. Children skipping stones. A fisherman repairing his net beneath a mango tree. A grandmother filling a bucket with fresh water. A little girl planting a young cedar sapling beside the bank. These were the stories River Mumma wanted remembered. By afternoon, Alana had printed several photographs at the small shop in the neighboring town. She pinned them to the notice board outside the community center. Above them, she wrote only 5 words. The river is remembering us. People stopped to look. Some smiled. Others frowned. A few stood there much longer than they intended. Mr. Sinclair adjusted his glasses. I haven't seen this bend look so beautiful in years. Miss Ivy nodded. It never stopped being beautiful. We simply stopped seeing it. One by one, more villagers gathered. Someone suggested organizing a river cleanup. A teacher offered to bring her students. The fishermen volunteered their boats to collect debris from deeper pools. Children argued over who would plant the most trees. The conversation spread through Harmony Gap like the scent of fresh rain. Not because anyone had seen River Mumma, but because everyone remembered the river. As evening approached, Alana returned alone to Mirror Bend. The water reflected the orange glow of the setting sun. She sat quietly on a smooth stone. No camera. No notebook. Just silence. The river flowed around her with patient certainty. Then, a single ripple crossed the surface. No wind stirred. No fish leaped. The ripple reached the bank, stopping gently at her feet. Floating upon it was a small white water lily, freshly opened. Impossible. No lilies grew upstream. Alana picked it up carefully. Its petals were cool against her fingers. She looked across the river. For the briefest moment, she thought she saw a woman standing beneath the bamboo. White dress. Long dark hair. A gentle smile. Then the light shifted. The figure was gone. Only the river remained. Alana placed the lily beside her grandfather's old camera. She whispered into the evening air. I'll keep the promise. The current carried her words downstream. Toward places she would never see. Toward generations she would never meet. And somewhere beneath the flowing water, It felt as though the river answered, not with words, but with a song only those who truly listened could hear. The river keeps every promise. That evening, the hills around Harmony Gap settled into their familiar quiet. Smoke rose gently from kitchen fires. The scent of pimento wood drifted through the cool night air. Tree frogs welcomed the darkness. The river flowed as it always had. Steady. Patient. Alive. Children who had helped clean the riverbank earlier that day laughed as they walked home, their muddy shoes leaving small footprints along the path. They talked about fish. About birds. About the strange white lily Alana had found. None of them mentioned River Mumma. Not because they had forgotten. Because some things become part of you without needing to be explained. The following week, visitors began arriving from neighboring districts. Not because of rumors. Because of Alana's photographs. The exhibition she created was simple. No dramatic headlines. No sensational claims. Only images. The river at sunrise. An old fisherman smiling beside his canoe. Children planting young lignum vitae trees. Mist rising through bamboo at Mirror Bend. And beneath each photograph, one sentence. We do not inherit rivers from our ancestors. We borrow them from our children. People lingered in front of the display. Some wiped away tears. Others quietly turned back toward the river before driving home. Without realizing it, Harmony Gap had become a place where people came not to chase legends, but to remember their responsibilities. Weeks later, Alana returned to Mirror Bend one last time before leaving for Kingston. She carried only her camera. Nothing else. She stood where she had first heard her name whispered across the water. The river flowed peacefully beneath the morning sun. No glowing mist. No mysterious figure. Only the gentle rhythm of moving water. She smiled. I understand now. The breeze answered by stirring the bamboo. Then, a kingfisher landed on the very rock where River Mumma had first appeared. It looked directly at Alana, tilting its head once, as if acknowledging an old friend. Then it flew downstream. Alana raised her camera. Click. When she checked the photograph, the kingfisher was there. The river was there. The sunlight was there. No mysterious woman. No spirit. No miracle. She laughed softly. Because she finally understood. River Mumma had never wanted proof. She wanted guardians. Back on the veranda, Papa Elias gently closed the old leather-bound book. The lantern beside him flickered as a cool breeze crossed the veranda. He looked toward the dark outline of the hills, then toward the listener. You know, people think rivers only carry water. He smiled. But rivers carry stories. They carry songs. They carry the footprints of everyone who has ever knelt beside them. He picked up his mug of bush tea, took one slow sip. And, if you listen carefully, every river will tell you the same thing. He looked toward the camera one final time. Take only what you need. Give back more than you found. And never forget. Nature remembers the people who remember it. He reached for the lantern. Its warm glow slowly faded into the Jamaican night. The chorus of tree frogs grew louder. The river whispered somewhere beyond the hills. Then, Papa Elias' familiar voice floated gently through the darkness. Walk good. A pause. And remember. Another pause. Every promise flows downstream. The lantern went out. Only the sound of the river remained. End of episode 3.